Welcome to Voices of Supported Employment, the podcast by DurhamEnable. Each episode highlights the stories of individuals with disabilities, job coaches, and employers all working together to build a more inclusive workforce. We explore the impact of supported employment, showcasing how job coaches empower individuals and how employers can create disability-confident organisations. Join us as we break down barriers, inspire change, and work towards a future where everyone can thrive in the world of work. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we will be hearing from two of our DurhamEnable job coaches, Corey Irons and Ken Hope. Corey and Ken provide some insight into their roles, talking about the work that they do with job seekers and some of the specific techniques that they use to help improve independence and create successful outcomes. Corey and Ken, welcome to the podcast. How are you both doing?
Fine.
Yeah, just fine, Ken.
Always fine.
Always fine. Oh, so good. It's so good to have you here, and thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the show today. I thought it would be a good idea to have both of you together at the same time because I know how you both work, and I thought that it might be a good conversation that we can have today. So before we get into kind of what we're talking about today, can I ask you both just to kind of introduce yourselves and what you do here at DurhamEnable?
Yeah, so I'm Corey Irons. I'm a job coach with DurhamEnable. I've been doing it. It's just coming up on 3 years now. So my role is I work with a caseload of individuals who identify as having a disability and looking to get into work and help them get there using the supported employment model.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Ken Hope. I'm a job coach for the local supported employment. As Corey said, I've got a caseload at the moment, about 17 now, who present barriers, and it's my job to move them into paid employment as best I can.
Mm-hmm. And the local supported employment programme, LSE, is specific needs, aren't they? So some who are on the programme Corey's working on wouldn't be on that one. They would qualify for the LSE. So can you just explain who?
Yeah, well, our funders is different also. We're funded by the DWP, so we're a pilot initiative. And predominantly we are supporting people who present with autism and or learning disability.
Yeah.
Whereas with the UK SPF funding, we can accept people identified as having mental health difficulty, also includes physical disabilities, and it's a bit of a broader range of who can accept. That's great. So between the two kind of strands of DurhamEnable, we can meet the needs of everyone. Yeah, that's really good. So Corey, what attracted you to becoming a job coach? Well, how did you get into this profession? Yeah, well, I came from being a primary school teacher. I found it a very stressful job and I wasn't enjoying it, so I was looking for a bit of a change. And being a job coach really jumped out because I could make a difference. It was helping people, which is a big part of what I liked, and also the fact that every day was different. It was really, really varied, and that is something wrong. You know, even just last week I was over at Spennymoor Football Club supporting a job seeker, going through to being in meetings about people's pathways from secondary school the next day. So I love the variety, and I love the fact that I can make a difference to people, and I get to work really closely with individuals and build a connection and better their life, really. I think that was the main thing for me, coming from that teaching background. Yeah. Great. Ken, how about you?
So it's very near my heart, supported employment. I've worked in some form of care or support for a long time now. And I found as I've come home now, supported employment is the way it should be. The model works, hence our successes. I came from a very Spartan upbringing, and I've done a lot of jobs managing leisure, etc. And moving into care and supported employment is definitely where I think I belong, and that's why I'm here to help.
Yeah, and I think that's the story that's kind of echoed throughout the team, isn't it? That lots of people have done different things, but have found where they fit within supported employment and job coaching and the work that we do.
I just think that's what makes the team so strong, is we've got such a very background of experiences, people from all over, different walks of life, different past experiences, which with the kind of people we're dealing with that will come from all different walks of life and are interested in different careers, it's definitely a massive benefit.
Yeah, definitely. So what we're going to talk about today is the different techniques that job coaches use and can use, and that's available to them to support the job seekers that come through the door. We don't have the one type of person that comes through. We have every single person actually is different. The needs vary. They may identify, they may have 10 who identify as having autism, but actually every single one of those people will present in a different way and their needs will be different. So therefore the techniques used to support them along this journey need to be different as well. Let's start by, looking at what kinds of techniques are you using currently to support some of the people on your caseload. Ken, should we start with you?
I lean more towards building trust and professional empathy. Once you get trust, they'll open up. You think they've gone through the system quite a lot to this point, and the trust isn't very strong. So if you get onto their level, you can find a lot about them. Now, I love to explore their hobbies and interests, and 9 times out of 10, the job coach has got some information on whatever they're into. And if you lean more towards that to build that empathy and trust, then they will open up and your journey won't be as hard because you'll be walking together. That makes sense.
Yeah. So when you find out about the hobbies and interests, then how do you use that? How do you use the information that you found out to then move that person on? Because you're saying building trust, and that is a technique, is a very, very valid one. And people would think, oh, well, that's just what you do. But actually, sometimes it does need spelling out that you need to build trust. Like you say, people have been through a system that may have let them down quite a lot. So then for them to come to us, it's almost like, well, are you going to do the same? So what is it? Can you give us an example of what you would do when you find out, when you built that little bit of trust, you started to make inroads?
Yeah, there's a guy, no names, there's a guy who wants to put them on, just spoke about. He's very much into quantum physics and paleontology, which happens to be, ironically, my interest. So we've hit it off, and I'm going to try and get the CSO to go to Hancock Museum in Newcastle, because obviously there's dinosaurs there, etc. So if I can get that he's just overawed that somebody's going to take the time out to actually do that. Now that is just gold dust to me, because when we come back from that, we just go and hit the ground running. I've even emailed Jurassic Park's advisor on dinosaurs, and his secretary, they call him Jack Horner, not in a corner. And his secretary's emailed back saying he's going to try and sort something out there to give this guy encouragement. Now and once again, he's just like, he's so ecstatic because nobody's ever shown him that depth of support. And this is what DurhamEnable do. We go above and beyond in all aspects, because it's that depth of support we need to give.
We'll be looking out for a Flex Fund application to Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I don't know if that all...
Yeah, Florida.
It's in Florida.
Yeah.
It's a good technique to get a holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
Good team building event.
Yeah, good team building event, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Using the interest to kind of
get the hook.
To get the hook,
I've got to get the hook.
Yeah.
And once you get the hook, we find out how we can cross-reference their passion, their skill set into a job that they feel comfortable in and they want to do.
Absolutely, yeah. Corey, have you got any kind of techniques that you might use time and time again, but obviously they look different for different people? What would you add to that?
Yeah, obviously a lot of my practice is underpinned by the training in systematic instruction principles. But I find some of the best technique I have is taking my clients into a range of environments. I think I learn the most about the people I support when we're out and about. So even like as simple as going for a walk. I think my biggest one was I was working with 2 individuals with a colleague, and we took them on the bus through to Hartlepool to cafe called the Geek Retreat and bought a milkshake and got the bus back. And I think I learned more about them in that few hours trip than I had in the meetings before, sat in the library, because we got to see how they dealt in different environments, how they handled cash, how they dealt with things when they were ordering, and I learned a lot about them. And then also it built their confidence, and they ended up then getting the train to Newcastle a few weeks later with their mum, because that confidence that they got from going on that trip with us. But I think usually it's the orthodox things, like you wouldn't think going for a walk is something that's really good, but it like Ken was saying, makes people feel comfortable and builds trust as well. I also agree with Ken about taking interest in their interest. That I think you're expecting them to learn new things that you're teaching them, that you getting on board with what they're interested in and learning about them and their interests gets them a bit more on board and a bit more receptive to what you want to say.
Yeah, and I think you can look at techniques. That even that word, and as a coach, you could look at it and think, well, I need to do certain things. I need to tick these boxes, or do something that is very, very linear. But actually what you both are saying is that you take the softer approach to start with, the things that are just natural, around building the relationships, finding out about the person who's in front of you is definitely like the first step, isn't it? The way in, and that will help you build on what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is just being adaptive with your techniques as well. Yeah. You could turn up to an appointment with a set agenda of what you want to discuss, and that person could have had an absolute crisis in their personal life, and you're then having to deal with that as opposed to what you want to see, with getting them to a place where they can get focused on the journey that you're taking them on. So I think it's always being open to trying something different and a different approach, and just being adaptive as well. I think the main thing in this job is that adaptability and flexibility.
Yeah. And I think the model allows us to do that. So we're based on a 5-stage model, and it does look like a stage 1, stage 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. But in realistic terms, it doesn't pan out that way. Yeah, we've got to do the basic information gathering. Yes. But after that, we could jump to stage 4 straight away, then link back down to stage 2. Yeah. And it's quite a fluid concept, which I love, because that gives us opportunities to explore how we can support in the most effective way and get the best outcomes.
Yeah. We move with the client.
With the client's demands and needs.
Yeah, exactly. Have you got any examples, either of you, where you're trying one technique, you're trying one way? I'm thinking about job seekers who've been on your caseloads maybe for a little while now. You've tried one way and it's not working, so you've had to kind of adapt. How have you, how did that journey maybe start, and then you thought, actually, this isn't working, we need to try something else?
I've got one previous job seeker who's now in employment, who had Down syndrome and just lost their mother, and was obviously very emotional, and Dad decided to latch on to the person, his daughter, and wouldn't let out his sight. So for about 4 months, I was supporting 2 people effectively, because he was going through crisis. Until one day I knew he's what I call a bed blocker. He wasn't letting me progress and develop that trust, because I was physically talking to him to talk to the job seeker. So one day I turned up and says, look, I think it's about time. Your daughter and I went on a hunt, and I did it that way. So I got his permission to take his daughter. From then on, within a month, we developed such a strong trust that she quickly moved into employment. But it was recognising that change needed to be made.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and for a lot of the people that we work with, the families come as the package, don't they? So we're not just as job coaches looking, okay, I've got this job seeker. Actually, sometimes you've got other family members that you are not necessarily having to manage, because it's that job seeker who's on your caseload, but actually the influence of whoever's in the house or supporting that person is something that we have to take into account as well. So even the techniques that we say we use for job seekers to help them find work and to move them along or closer to that, actually we're using techniques for, like you say, Ken, for for mums, for dads, for sisters, for brothers, for people around who might think, oh, they'll never work. Or I remember, Corey, you saying something about, a family unit who had told one of your job seekers that we were trying to exploit when it were work trial, something like that.
Yes. I think that individual had they'd not had good experiences with employment and their family in general, and we'd arranged it was an unpaid work trial, but with a job offer at the end, so more like a working interview. And they'd said to the nephew, my client, that no, they're just going to take advantage of you. It's just like all the ones you've done before. They just want to get to work for free, and I had to go and mend those bridges and actually explain what we were and show the job analysis and say how it was going to work. And I think part of it is breaking down the barriers. A lot of the clients we work with have had so many services involved with them who have promised things and not delivered, or not promised things. And so to show that we can do that and become that person of trust as well is definitely a big thing. It's not always the clients, it's their families as well, because they want to protect their children who can be vulnerable.
So we're kind of getting a lot of messages from what both of you are saying around the job coach needing to be as creative as possible. When they've heard what a job seeker is saying, or a new client is saying, to be creative and thinking about, okay, how can I tap into their interests? We might be emailing Jurassic Park, and then be flexible and adaptable as well, and understand that actually it's not just them. It's not necessarily just that person we're dealing with or that we're supporting. It's like there's other people, there's other people involved. I think that's really helpful for new job coaches to understand that, but also people who've been in the work for a while. And sometimes you can lose sight of that, can't you? You can forget that actually there's a wider.
The circle of support is very important to get them on board as much as the job seeker. You've got to be very intuitive, and you've got to pick up little hints and signs of what could sway a job seeker's journey, or how their circle of support may be, like Corey said, slightly negative and put barriers up. So, they're kicking down more than their own barriers. They're kicking down the family and the circle of support. And that can be quite difficult, but it's tenacity that gets you through it.
Yeah.
Tenacity and belief in the model.
Yeah.
I think it's not just the circle of support, but the environment as well. So, for example, I was working with an individual, and every appointment we had for the first month or 2 months, all she spoke about was a house. And mum's in the house, and it sounded like quite a difficult situation she was in, but we didn't get anywhere in terms of support and employment. And I think I was newer as a job coach and thought, well, we're not talking about employment every appointment, and I was getting thinking, what am I doing wrong here? And then once I actually looked at it, got her linked in with some social housing and got her out of that environment, and both her and her mum into separate houses and new houses, and she flew. Then she started her own business, and it was honestly like just insane progress from when that was fixed. So I think it's that hierarchy of needs, and sometimes they need to sort something else before they're ready to think about work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know there's a lot of things that impact on being able to go into work, isn't there? So being stable in a house that or home that's that works for them is really important.
That's one of the big techniques as well as a job coach, is recognising what your client needs when they're sat in front of you. Yes, you want to talk about progressing towards work, but sometimes they just need to talk to a person, and that helps build that trust as well, that you're not trying to sit there and say, oh, I know this horrible thing just happened to you, but let's talk about work. I had a client recently who's just been scammed quite badly and nearly lost their house, and then I had the first meeting with them, and it was just to catch up and just to chat, and we didn't talk too heavily about what we were going to do, and they said that was just what they needed, and then the next appointment we got twice as much out of it because we took that time to rebuild, help rebuild and build that relationship rather than just going straight into talk.
Let's just go back a little bit, because Corey, you mentioned teaching systematic instruction, and we've all as a team, everybody's had that sort of that training. I remember it was my very first day actually at DurhamEnable that I was launched into TSI.
Headache after that.
It was just like, what is this?
Yeah, what have I done?
Well, not even necessarily that. I think coming from a teaching background, and I taught for 16, 18 years in education, a bit in primary, but mostly in secondary, and I had never seen anything delivered in that way before. Like, you go through your teaching qualification, and it's not, I'm not here to say that any of that is wrong in the way it's done, but TSI, that systematic instruction approach, was just like, for want of a better phrase, it was eye-opening. I was just like, this is incredible, because the message, yes, that anyone who wants to work can work with the right support. If you show them the right way, if you support them in the right way, they can work. And I was just, that was like my very first day in supported employment. I was shown that. So I feel quite blessed to be able to say that was what I did on my first day in this role.
I don't think that's a bad thing, because TSI does underpin it. It's TSI, supporting employment. So having that on your first day into this role was probably the best thing, instruction you could have had, because that's what I got it. I think about a year and a half into my work as a job coach, and then it all kind of clicked in. So I think getting on your first day was definitely probably the best.
I think the reductionist approach was, to me, which TSI is, it breaks everything down, it reduces everything to the bare basics, and then we rebuild is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And it's that training that's given me the tool and the skill set to be able to break people down and find out where the barriers can really lie, and then build them up from there. And TSI was fundamental in helping me doing that.
What we've got, TSI was huge. It's 5 days, isn't it, of training, and there's a lot of content in there. And we will have an episode that's dedicated to TSI. But just in kind of like to kind of boil it down, I guess, what were your takeaways from the training? What were the things that you can say now, yes, I carry that forward in my work? What is it that you use? Corey, do you want to?
I think it's obviously coming from teaching, where you're teaching children things they need to succeed, obviously in life, but in school, that's very much the environment you're in. But I think what I took away was that you're preparing people for real life. You're teaching things task specific in the environment that they're going to be taught in. And also, I found quite powerful was that there's no external motivation from you as the trainer. You're not there saying, good job, well done. The motivation comes from achieving the task, which is a key part of work. And if that person, it applies to yourselves as well. If you're not motivated by the work you do, you're not going to enjoy it, you're not going to do it. You don't need someone telling you well done. I think that was my main thing about where motivation comes from. And I think embracing the silence as well, that you can teach without having to talk, and eventually, it will get through. So there's quite a lot there. I'm not sure what you took away from it.
I sat and thought about it after the week. It gave me such clarity. It broke it down in the simplest terms as to how we should approach our job and not get overwhelmed by given techniques that really shouldn't be given. It gave me clarity, and also it allowed, from my experience in that week, it allowed people who may struggle with complex instructions to be able to break them complex instructions down to still complete the task, which means that theory and that technique could be used in day-to-day jobs that they were looking for. So it give everybody an improved chance of employment.
I think as well it taught me to consider assumed knowledge, that people know how to do certain things. Okay, if we're getting an office job, okay, let's turn your laptop on. Someone we work with might never have done that before. When you break down a task, there's actually so many components to it that you have to teach someone, and not to assume that people know things just because you know it yourself.
Definitely.
And it definitely elevated our support structure and our support service, but by far. Yeah. Because I went out into the field after that thinking, not taking things for granted, and thinking they may need to be brought back and reduced down to what and it works. And it works.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, but the values itself, that zero rejection, that everybody wants to work, can work, I think just massively underpins everything that we do. I found when we did our refresher course a few months ago, really motivating in the role to remind yourself what we're doing, why we're here, and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I just believe it would be great if we could cascade that across to employers. Mm-hmm. She said, do you want to try a deal with TSI?
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And then would show them the concept that our job seekers can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
All it needs is a little bit more thought. preparation.
And I think everybody knows, well, everyone who's done TSI knows about the bike break, don't they?
Yeah.
They know that's the main task, isn't it? Where we are tasked with putting together a bike break, and then having to teach someone else how to do that using the sort of techniques that were being taught. So talk to us about the bike break that you know. How
the first day I walked in, they had the bike breaks out in pieces.
Yeah.
So Mr. Know-it-all sat down, I can do this, not a problem. And they weren't saying any words, and they were putting it together, assembling it together, the tutors. So I'm still sitting there half an hour later in bits, and everybody else has completed. And I've got my head in my hands thinking, I thought I knew how to do this, but it doesn't work. Yeah. You know, and that illustrator that I'm going in meeting job seekers expecting that them have got a greater knowledge of skill set than what they really have. Mm-hmm. That's what brought that out.
Yeah. And I think some of the language that we use around tasks, again, going back to that assumed knowledge, grasp this part of the break. Well, what is a grasp? So they break it down even further into how you grip it. They've got certain grips. But I think I enjoyed putting the bike break together. Getting paid to do it was brilliant because it's very mechanical, isn't it? It's satisfying when it slots in and everything, and it spins. And I remember thinking on the training, this is great, but it's not going to work. And then when I actually did it, and within 3 goes, the person that I was instructing, with using 5 words probably in total across 3 tries, was doing it independently. I was still just amazed, like say, my 3 years at university to become a teacher, just sort of went out the window, like, hang on, I've just taught someone something without even speaking. But yeah, no, it was very satisfying when you put the break in. I think when we did our refresher, I still knew how to do it.
Right.
I was really nerdy. I took it home.
It goes in, doesn't it? When you
stuff like that. So I was really.
You've done and I think that when I've reflected on kind of the bike break, it's a really it's quite a specific task, isn't it? That you're teaching someone how to put this thing together, and it would transfer quite easily into say a factory job and things like that. But a lot of the time we're not putting people into those kinds of roles. A lot of the work is hospitality, it's admin, lots of varied roles, but nothing so specific where you've got I can't remember how many pieces there were. So I just remember it being a lot. Not so specific where you've got something that you're putting together all of the time. And it's easy, I think, when you've been through something so detailed as that TSI course, to think, well, I've never used that, or I don't use that in my day-to-day, because you're not physically holding or teaching someone how to put a bike break together. But how have it transfers? And I, when I think about it, I think, well, I don't know whether it's about the bike break at all. It's about the concepts that we're learning and the skills that we're learning to be able to support someone to do the work that they're doing. So how have you used TSI? Because I don't think you've helped anyone put a bike break together, have you?
Not yet.
Not yet. But there's still time.
It's transferring what you've learned. So, one of the days is travel training, which I've done a lot. But I think the main thing for me is those natural cues, and with how do you know when a task is completed or you've done the right step? And I think with the bike break, everything slots into place and it spins, and that's how you know the job is done. But it's showing people that when this happens, that shows that you've done it correctly. So you mentioned hospitality, for example. If you're in a hotel, you're giving someone their room key, you know that you've done that task well when that person leaves the desk. It's those natural cues. Yeah. I think that's the main thing I've taken away, is when you're working with individuals, is right, what's the natural cue? What shows us that task has been completed? Oh, if that hasn't happened, then we need to go back and perhaps have a look at it. And it's the same way with travel training. You look for the natural markers of when we get to this point, that you need to, we've got X amount of stops left, for example.
I've used it, what I call reverse engineering. So I know this, I told you I was a maverick. So what I tend to do is find out what the job seeker's goal is. Yeah. and then I'll reverse it and I'll step it down step by step of where that person wants to be and how we're going to get them there. So it's a bit like the bike brake, where it's the opposite, where I'm taking it apart and I'm laying it down in front, and then I'm saying, right, that's where you are, this is where you would like to be, and this is the journey we need to travel, and we're going to put these steps together and continue on marching until we get to that goal. Yeah. And it's not as strict as that. It's a bit like the model. I'm sorry for going back up to the model, but I love the model. It's a bit like the model, it could be fluid. But as long as we reach that goal, and it's exactly person-centred, that's what I've taken from TSI. I break everything down and reverse it and then build it back up again. And it tends to work. I'm not saying it works all the time, but I've had some really good successes since I've done the TSI. Just by that alone. Yeah,
it's definitely something that you can kind of take parts of, and use what you need to, talk about the travel training when you look at that discrepancy analysis and making sure that someone can actually do the steps. But it's definitely something that I would recommend anybody doing on their very first day of joining any service. I think you should do it. I think you should do it on the very first day. So I think the stars just aligned that day, and I was able to do that. But it was fun. I've really enjoyed talking to you two today. Not that I don't usually. Just today. It's been really good to talk to you today and to hear kind of, I think I do hear from time to time, but for other people to hear what it is that you do and how you do your work. You're going to get a lot of emails now, Ken, saying, "Can you get me in touch with Universal Studios Florida?"
Yeah. I'll be back at them again, don't worry.
Yeah, but before we end, we always say that we never work to a work readiness model. We never say, well, this person's not ready for work. And the question, that I'm sure we all have had when we've been in trainings is, were you ready for your first job? So, Corey, what was your first job and were you ready?
Well, so when I turned 13, I had a mobile phone, and my parents said, "Do you like your mobile phone?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Do you want to keep putting credit on it and texting your friends?" I said, "Yeah," and then we'll go and get a job then. So I've been working since I was 13. I worked as a paper boy, which if we want to go really that far back, and I loved it and worked my way up. But I think my main job was obviously as a teacher. And one thing I always put to a lot of my clients, they're ready to work and they say, "I just want to do anything. I'll just do anything." And I think for me, yes, you don't always feel ready. When I first stood in front of that class full of children, I thought, I feel not much older than them. I do not feel ready for this, and massive imposter syndrome. But I think what I highlight is the importance of the correct job. I went into a job that paid really well, and I thought it's what I wanted to do. And it was extremely detrimental to my mental health, and it took a long time to recover from that. So I think one thing I emphasise is picking the right job over the quickest job, which wasn't what you asked at all, so I apologise about that.
Well, but it's good advice. It's good advice, and I think the answer is no. Nobody's ever ready for the first job, and definitely having 30 faces looking at you, however young or old, is not. No one's ever going to be ready for that. But Ken, what about you?
My first job, 14-year-old, as a removal man with Dad on the weekends to help pay the bills. And that was hard work. Three house removals per day. Just on the Saturday, sorry. And then I'd hand all the money over to Papa, which was hard, and I'd done all that work. But being ready, certainly not ready. Not as a young 14-year-old boy expected to carry big furniture. And then when everybody else was running around playing games with their friends, etc. But it was a life lesson. And it gave us good ethics when it comes to work. And there's always a reason. Always a reason.
Absolutely.
The main man in the sky's always got a reason in my eyes, so it is what it is, and it's made us the person I am today.
I think we put too much pressure on ourselves, and I know my clients do. They'll say, "Well, I don't know how to do this if I got this job," and I have to explain that. They're not expecting you to know how to do that. The employer, it's your first time doing this. They're not expecting you to know that, and it's more the case when I have older clients who perhaps haven't worked before. I think they think because they're older, they should be expected to know more. But let's face it, if an employer is willing to work with you and it's your first role, they're not going to expect you to know what to do. So as long as you're there willing to learn, that's, you know, and you've got the right support in place, that's as ready, so to speak, as you need to be, because you will learn everything, and that circles back to TSI. Is that's what you teach is the things you don't know when you get to work, which is the actual task of what you're going to be doing. It's the same when I started this job. I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah, well, yeah, you think that the skills transfer from teaching, and they do, and they absolutely do. But yeah, you're learning something new. We're learning all the time.
The first day I got told to work from home, I didn't know what I had to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So we're all still learning is the message. You know, you're never going to be ready. You just got to get in there and do it. Yeah. But then with a job coach, with supported employment, you know, that does help the model. Absolutely. That it really does help a lot of people who are furthest away from employment, you know.
And last word, I think it's very important to get, if the job seeker needs it and requires it, to get them out in the field with you and visit companies and desensitize them to the world of work.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. I take them on EE sessions, and I just introduce, employee engagement sessions, where I'm taking them out to businesses in the locality that fits their job sector choice, and just say, can we have a chat? And I've done a variety of businesses, and it's just trying to take that shock away from them and get them used to that. You know, there's a world out there where people go to work, and I want to be a part of that world.
And we reflect that in our appointments. One of the things we use is meeting people outside of their home in public spaces. So then, you know, if we did home visits, I did it when I first started about home visits, and people would just come downstairs and they're just woken up. But you think, really, when you go to work, you have to think about getting home, having something to eat, you know, getting changed, getting washed and everything. And that's why we meet people in the community. Yes, some of our job seekers think it's a pain because I've got a car and I could just drive to their house and go and meet them there. But really, that's why we meet them a bit further away, so they get the experience of planning their day and getting up and getting ready for a certain time. So that when they do step into the world of work, they're used to that and getting to places for certain times and all the bits that come along with it, rather than them having to learn all a new job. And they're going to have to get up at 7 o'clock and they've been getting up at midday for the past 4 years or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could talk for a long time about this, couldn't we? And will you come back?
100%.
Yeah. I better put these notes away then next time.
Yeah, it would be so nice to have you back. But it was really lovely to have you today and talking about this. I hope it's inspired the job coaches up and down the country, really, and the job seekers as well. But you know, job coaches who are people who might be thinking about coming into the profession, or you know, who are in it already and just kind of needed a little bit of a motivational push to keep going.
Talk.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to Voices of Supported Employment. We hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to download, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more people and spread the message of inclusion. Until next time, let's continue working together to create a workforce where everyone knows that they are safe, seen, and supported.